Welcome to How Women Inspire. Today, you get to meet Lori Adams Brown. This woman is so incredibly special and so multifaceted. You are in for a treat. She's a leader in global talent development, and you're going to see in a minute why she is so perfectly poised for that based on her life experience. And she's a passionate advocate for us, for women in leadership. Lori is a global talent development director for a tech company in the Silicon Valley, and she's driving all the initiatives and ensuring alignment with the company's global teams. So she speaks many languages and has got a great global footprint. So I can only imagine what value she is bringing to the table in that role. And she also pays it forward all the time and really elevates the rest of us because she's the host of one of the top 5% of global podcasts, which is called A World of Difference. So she interviews leaders making a real impact across industries. And with over 2 decades of experience, Lori has worked globally as an expat in Asia and now shapes talent strategies at this leading tech company in the Valley. She's also an active member of our Silicon Valley Executive Board at How Women Lead. She serves on the board of Justice Revival in Washington, D.C. And when she's not doing all of that and shaping the future of leadership, she travels around the world with family and friends, or sometimes alone, which I want to dig into a little bit, and always with a good book in hand. Welcome, Lori. I'm so excited that we're having this conversation today.
Thanks, Julie. It's an honor to be here. Hi, everyone listening. I really appreciate having this conversation.
Okay, Lori, it'll be interesting to see if your global experience has any impact on this. But do you have a theme song or something that like lifts you up when you need it, or is something that you break out on those days when you want to celebrate?
Well, I love music. I come from a family on both sides, on my mom and my dad's side, that are very musical. I have a brother who's an award-winning songwriter. He writes folk music. And so music has always been a huge part of my life. So it does change my but I would say recently I've been really into this one song, and it's written for the new president that was elected in Mexico, who was a woman. And so the song is called Compañera Presidenta, which I highly recommend. And if you don't speak Spanish, you could just get Google to translate it for you. But it's a great song. And I love hearing it because even though it's written specifically for the Mexican president, it's definitely about women leaders and how we should lead with our lens of being a woman, which is something I'm really big on. We all have a different lens, which is why I host a podcast called A World of Difference, because I want to hear people's perspectives. But there's a part of the song that I really love, and I'll just say it all in English, but it's don't forget that you have the eyes of a woman. Don't forget that you have the mouth of a woman. Don't forget that you fight like a woman in the fight for women. And don't ever become tired of being great or grand and for being a woman. And it's just be who you are. And then it goes on into like how she will see the children and all the efforts of her nation in a different way. And I just get really inspired by that because as I lead both women and men, I want people to show up with their lens. I think it's better. And I love to see women around the world who are leading at the highest levels of government. I was really disappointed when Kamala Harris didn't win. I have always been a huge fan of Jacinda Ardern ever since she got elected in New Zealand. And even the way she stepped away and just all of that. I got to hear her at the California Conference for Women last year in person and really fangirled over her. But this song has really, really been inspiring me lately. So check it out, Compañera Presidenta.
Oh my goodness. I have chills listening to you describe this. And I speak Spanish, so I'm surprised I haven't
Yes.
heard it yet. But I just think for all of us, we're in this interesting moment at the beginning of 2025 where we are watching this odd, hyper, I don't know, this explosion of leadership that is the opposite of what you just described. I think about you as such a global leader. How many languages do you speak, Lori?
So 6, I speak 4 fluently, and then I've studied a couple others.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody needs to know, Lori, you are so incredibly special. When you look at global leadership and you think about this balance of the feminine and the masculine and making sure, that women actually lead like women, because the women who are older than I am, I would watch a lot of them lead more male than the men. And
Yep.
it's sometimes pretty darn sharp elbows. But I'm older than you, but you and I are part of a generation of women who are really the first generation of women leaders who are defining what does it mean to be a woman leader with our own voice. So, what are you seeing either globally or in your own global talent development role when you think about that sort of what it means to be a female leader today?
Honestly, something I'm leaning into right now is human leadership, just humanity. We see a lot about masculinity lately. There's been quite a bit in the news from even CEOs of Silicon Valley companies here, which are very influential. And the Venn diagram of business, especially tech and politics, is we cannot ignore it anymore. It's right in our face. And so it's affecting our society. And when I see people overly emphasizing masculinity and particularly toxic masculinity, I just come back to let's be human. And when we're human, whatever your gender identity is, whatever way your culture has viewed you and your gender and your sexuality and the way your body lives and moves throughout the world is unique to you. And the beauty of humanity is we're all unique. They say our neurological wiring is as unique as our fingerprint. So I train on this globally and in the company where I've rolled out this key leadership strategy for either from individual contributors to manager training to our executives and advising our president and COO as well and bringing them into the trainings. It doesn't matter who you are, where your seat is at the table, if you have a decision making role or not, we are all unique. And I think that's so beautiful. I love that about being in Silicon Valley. I loved it being in Singapore, very diverse places to live and work. But the studies have shown when we invite women to the table, both in some of the research around boards, which you often talk about, we see Malcolm Gladwell even mentioning this in his book. There's this magic of at least having a third, women there. We see incredible things happen. We make better decisions, profits and greed, all these things. It's not only good to have women leaders there for peacemaking, we see that actually be more successful, which honestly, for any of us who have ruled at any length of time, either as a babysitter or a teacher or a mom or a sister, right? I mean, we're always somehow involved in peacemaking. I have twins that are teenagers and
Oh gosh,
they're
I
like,
can only
yin,
imagine.
right? It's like yin yang. I mean, the things that we do, we develop certain skills. You need that. We need it in politics, we need it in education, academia, we need it in business, we need it in all industries. And so as I train in my locus of control, I invite women to be themselves because I invite everybody to be themselves, whether you're culturally from India or Singapore, and I'm working with you in a workplace in Silicon Valley. I want you to bring that
Yeah.
because it helps us be
Yeah.
better. We see things we wouldn't have seen. And then also at the other end, I'm really hoping people will listen to understand each other, our different facts, feelings, and values so that we can be better together. Man, woman, whatever your culture is.
Yeah.
I think that's how we get better.
Well, it's so interesting. I've been thinking a lot about watching what's going on. And it's like, I love diversity. I love learning about other cultures. I love like leaning in and being like, how does this show up for you? And you've worked globally and you train people on how to embrace like a global mindset. What are you seeing in your work? And how does that, I mean, I know the data is really clear on corporate boards, for example, about the innovation and the financial returns, et cetera, when people are allowing for different cultural perspectives to disrupt groupthink. But what is the impact on organizations when you
Yeah.
when you can adopt a global mindset? And how do you consistently make that happen and reinforce it?
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, I almost can't even be overstated, right? Diversity is a word that for some reason has become like this bad word to say, and so if it's triggering to people listening, I'm so sorry. I love the word differences. That's my podcast is called A World of Difference, where we bring our differences around the table to make a difference. I hope that word doesn't get taken to a difficult place, but whether you call it differences or diversity, this really drives innovation. And so research shows companies with diverse teams generate 19% higher revenue from innovation. There's a BCG study about this. Global talent and markets, organizations with a global mindset outperform competitors by really understanding the differences in the markets. Like I have a little more understanding of Southeast Asian markets because, I lived and worked there for a long time. Somebody might have a better understanding of like African markets. These are all like any of these emerging markets, particularly you want that on your board. You want it at the top levels of your international talent to attract that talent. Resilience and agility, companies that embrace global perspectives are more adaptable in crisis. I recently wrote something on my LinkedIn about polycrisis, which is something I've endured throughout my career where I worked in disaster relief and the tsunami, which happened to hit the area where I was living and working in nonprofit over 20 years ago now. And, a lot of us experience that in the pandemic, right? So you have multiple crises that might be happening at once. So when you bring different perspectives, it gives you more agility to pivot. We used to say in 2020 a lot, but resilience as well. And cultivating resilience, a lot of that is just bringing in the different perspectives. We see long-term success happen. We see organizations better equipped for it with diversity and then leadership growth. I mean, I would say a global approach develops more effective leaders, improving cross-cultural collaboration and decision making. It's just huge for organizations. I don't think you can overstate it.
So, if you are coaching a team or a CEO on it, what are some of the practical ways that you can roll some of this out in a company?
Yeah, well, one of my favorite thought leaders and academics around leadership is Dr. Brene Brown. I know a lot of us love her. I actually have her book, Dare to Lead, here on my desk. I have several of her books. I think leadership it requires courage. We must be brave in moments that really matter. We must have tough conversations, right? We must come with our whole hearts, which is something that book really challenged me on and still does. And so I would say transparent communication is huge. One of my favorite Brene Brown quotes is she talks about clarity as kindness. I quote this a lot in my company and as I'm training our executives, really ensuring that two-way dialogue between executives and managers in particular helps us align on strategy and execution. So I have this key leadership strategy. I was very fortunate to be brought into this company where I've worked for a couple of years to come in and just from scratch build the whole kind of global talent strategy for our development and raise up and build my own team. And I really have it's like a small but mighty dream team for me. It's diverse. The leaders, we care for each other, we support each other. We know that in a burnout culture like Silicon Valley, we are collectively responsible for each other. We belong to each other, and caring for each other is how we go through this and how we set ourselves up for a year where polycrisis is very potentially going to come our way. And so, as I bridge the conversation between some of our managers and our executives, these are some of the things I'm training all of us on: listening to understand for our facts, feelings, and values. Also, having conversations where we can do feedback that allows us to hear from each other, not only to express the impact of what somebody's behavior did, but also be curious about what their intent was. And so hearing from each other. And then from there, our third part of our key leadership strategy is something called direction alignment commitment, where I get our leaders in a room, and whether they're in the UK or in the US or in Asia, they go through a process with each other and individually where they come out with their biggest opportunity. Is it direction that they're kind of missing? Is it alignment where everybody's all over the place? Or are they lacking commitment? And so they get really clear on that. We also talk about Fundamental Four. That's one of the courses I've rolled out where we talk about the four key parts of leadership from the research that they need to be focusing on. We have all these trainings in Mandarin and Spanish. So I've had our team working on that. So I'm trying to be very inclusive also with the languages. So I think inclusive leadership, leaders should actively listen to diverse perspectives, fostering engagement at all across the levels. Cross-cultural training really involves us having like a cultural intelligence. So we think of emotional intelligence, but cultural intelligence is really important, helping our leaders navigate global teams and just saying, I don't understand. Help me
Yeah.
understand. That's like a very good posture. You don't have to know everything. Empowering our middle management with tools to translate vision into action by creating buy-in from employees by really being a caring and good listener. And then our data-driven insights, like our employee
Mm.
feedback and our analytics to inform decisions is something I'm bringing to our president and our COO and the meetings that I have with them as I help bridge the gap between what's really happening and what could really help us move forward.
I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth. And we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making a commitment that in the next 12 months, you're going to give yourself 12 months to figure it out? and to take a step. I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. I mean, you just gave us a recipe for like how to be married, how to be a good parent, and how to just navigate the world, be a good friend. I mean, all of this is sort of basic, but part of me, I have this sort of part of me that's like this individualistic culture in the United States is so different than the collectivist behaviors of other cultures or values of other cultures. And there's also so I'm married to a Mexican, an immigrant, so he's very, very Mexican, and there's a lot of this, like, I grew up in the Midwest and, people talk about conflict avoidance. It's such a complex thing, like, in the Mexican culture, it's often like, they won't tell you if they're not coming for dinner, they just won't show up, and it's like, "Would you just tell me if you're coming to dinner or not?" Like, it's telling someone no is actually you have to read between the lines to understand what the message is saying, and so really trying to bridge those gaps when people think the world should accommodate the individualistic American culture, it's a big leap. How long does it seem to take people to get there? Like, what behavior modification change strategy like, how long? We know it takes a certain amount of time before someone has new behaviors, right?
Yeah, no, it does. Absolutely. I think that, it's such a variety. A book that I really found helpful, and you may have already read this, is Erin Meyer's The Culture Map. It's great
Yeah.
for work, but also works for relationships too. It's something I read when I was in Singapore. But it's sort of it's this timeless guide. It's a map
Yeah.
really to help you understand that where you are on the spectrum of, for example, low context, high context communication. That's really huge. Like
Get to
we
the point.
exactly. So in the United States, our history, because we had so many immigrants here, we had to learn how to be very direct because we weren't homogeneous. Whereas Japan is the polar opposite of us on the spectrum because they were so homogeneous for so long, very isolated even from the rest of the world. And so you didn't have to spell it out. It's like read the air. There's words in Japanese for read the air. And a lot of East Asian cultures kind of lend toward that. So it's just that's something I train on in my workplace, just to say,
Love that.
sometimes we have to say it's going to be a little more uncomfortable for some of the East Asians, but the United States, they're not going to get it, and then Europe is a little bit somewhere in between. So sometimes people get insulted by even like, in our academics, like where we teach people and our kids in school, it's like, say what you're going to say it and say it again. That gets really annoying for a lot, even some European cultures where they're like, why did you say it so many times? The cultures are just fascinating. They're quirky. They're funny. It's not right or wrong. It's just how we
Yeah,
do it. But when
yeah.
we're all in this workplace together or family together, it really does require us to be a little more patient and just kind of, observe and listen, observe the body language, which is over 50% of how we communicate. It's only
Lori,
7%
you're just
words.
so fascinating. I feel like I want hours with you with this conversation. Can we talk a little bit about is there a gender difference in people's ability to understand and execute on some of this? I'm reading a lot about hormones and stuff. And estrogen is actually that hormone that it makes you want to accommodate other people and take care of other people, right? And I wonder if, like, when you're younger as a woman, like, I might have less estrogen than I used to have. So I may or may not be as accommodating as I might have been before. Like, do you see any gender differences?
It is fascinating because everywhere is so different. Like, when I lived in Sumatra, I lived under Islamic law, Sharia law. So I wore hijab and all, no fingernail polish, no pork, no alcohol. And then right south of that people group, the Achinese people group on Sumatra, right below them geographically, is one called the Minangkabau, who are also Muslim, but it's a matrilineal culture. And so there were just some nuances there that were quite different. I think most of our cultures around the world where patriarchy is very prevalent, right? And so you do see even some of the studies, there's also a matrilineal culture in China where they do see, the well-being for women is just so much higher because when
Mhm.
who holds the power and the dynamics in the society. So I think, yeah, there's definitely biology, and I definitely am not a biologist, although I'm super fascinated by all of the neurology and biology and people writing about this, especially as I get to become a woman of a certain age and I'm interested in how my own body is changing. But I do think that ultimately, my undergrad's in sociology. I know you studied social work. So I'm always going to see it through that lens of how society molds us. I mean, I have twins. And so my husband had a bachelor's in psychology and now he has an MFT as well. So we were always a little bit different on is it nurture or nature? But when we had twins, they were just born different. right?
Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
the same day,
It
same
humbles
family.
you so much. You
It does. It
yeah.
does. So I think it plays a role. As to how much of a role it plays, I don't know, but I do know
Yeah.
that we're all capable of
Of
learning to
course.
empathy and that we shouldn't ask women to only be the ones who accommodate. Those are kind of the shoulds of it all,
Yeah.
I think.
So most of the people listening to this are probably women. So in this context of leadership, how can women on board specifically influence the focus on cultures and values and the long-term impact and the global perspective? Is there a unique role women play when they come into the boardroom?
I think so. Not only are we good for business, but we are also bringing in a different lens. And I mentioned earlier, all of our lenses are as unique as our fingerprint based on the cultures we grew up in, based on the languages that we speak, our mother tongue, and all the others if we speak others, based on the teachers we had. Even my twins have very different lenses, having grown up in the same family, because our bodies and how we live and move in the world and our personalities, there's just a variety. So when you bring women, they're going to have experienced the world in a different way, not only because we socialize women differently, in addition to the biology being different, but largely speaking, women's perspectives enhance corporate governance and decision making. Not all the time, but we're going to bring a different lens on even the ethics of leadership,
Right.
right? Around AI and these major decisions that are being made that are affecting politics and society and business. Women buy products for
Yeah.
ourselves, for our families. We're going to want to know, is there too much plastic in that? And then I'm ingesting it and it's getting into my brain or whatever. Like, we're going to care about these things in a different way. Long term thinking, though, also studies show that companies with more women in leadership really prioritize sustainability and long term impact. We're kind of socialized to think about not just ourselves. Now, I'm not saying there aren't women narcissists out there. There certainly are, but we're just talking generally speaking, right?
Right.
Psychological safety is something I train on a lot in my company because we know from Google's Project Aristotle, it's the key for successful teams. And so, psychological safety and inclusion, when we have women on boards, they advocate for workplace culture quite a bit more, for improvements in that area, which leads to something I spend a lot of time working on in talent development, which is better retention and engagement. And doesn't everybody want that these days?
Yeah.
And then lastly, I would just say there's a lot of data backed results of from research. McKinsey finds that gender diverse executive teams are 25% more likely to outperform financially. So when it comes to the
Well, I
bottom
guess
line,
everybody's up gamed. I mean, women are, of course,
yeah,
fabulous, but the men behave differently. They don't do the group think, right? And that's what's so dangerous for decision making. It
so
stops
dangerous.
innovation. It has such a big impact. So much easier and more comfortable for most of us to be in an environment where people are just like us. And, I know I can count on Lori to make the decisions about everything people. And so, and Rebecca does all the finance and stuff. And I show up and do the marketing piece, let's say, and really having an environment where everybody brings their full selves and their full perspective in the boardroom and in these teams is just so essential. But a lot of women, and I would say even the most powerful women I know, they may have overcome it in certain ways, but there's a sense of self-doubt or like some people hate the word imposter syndrome, but that sense of like, am I enough? And the culture told you you're not. And you have to keep proving yourself. So let's be clear. You get it honestly. But can you talk about your advice on how to overcome that? Yeah, because I know you're coaching leaders on this all the time.
I am coaching leaders both in and outside of my workplace and just consulting on this. I think this is a really important conversation because you can tell women all day long to be confident and to walk in that room and say these things. And some of the research shows, even for example, in salary negotiation, you give men and women the same talking points and she's going to be perceived very differently. And then she may or may not blame herself for what did I say it wrong? Was I too strong? They didn't like me. The likability factor goes crazy with this. And so it is hard. And certainly I have been in spaces that tried to make me small throughout my life, obviously, to be silent, to defer to men's voices. These are all things I think women have faced on a certain level no matter where they have lived, unless they get to be blessed in a matrilineal culture, then maybe not. But I would say I also am not a huge fan of imposter syndrome because in some ways it does seem a little bit somewhat victim blaming if you
Yeah,
kind of embody
right,
that.
right.
But I do say that the system is designed to make you doubt yourself. The system is designed to make you small, to make you silent, to just deal with being interrupted, mansplained, all the things. But I think that the way we push through is how women lead. I mean, we support each other, we amplify each other, and then help each other kinda reverse gaslight ourselves or reframe that self-doubt.
Reinforce her voice. Yeah.
Yes. So self-doubt is common. It signals growth though, and confidence comes from action, not perfection. I think owning your expertise, that's something I've had a lot of mentors and peers encourage me to do. Women are often, overqualified but hesitant to take the leap before we feel quote unquote ready. Or we might look at another woman and be like, is she ready? I think if we go from the posture that we're ready and we're ready together because we have this together, we don't rely on individuals, but we're collective. And this is something I think is an advantage often for women if we lean into it. Finding allies and mentors, that's been huge for me. Building a support system of mentors and sponsors who champion my leadership. And then I, in turn, do that for others, right? And visibility creates a lot of impact. Stepping up isn't about ego, it can be, but
Yeah.
it's about making a difference for others,
Yeah.
right? It's
Right.
shifting the narrative and asking, am I good enough to say, what value can I bring to this space?
Yeah. Oh my god. So we have, as you know well, because 'cause you're on my board and you're a champion of our organization, our credo, you just, like, reinforced it over and over and over again, this counter the culture is not great for any of us, and it's especially harsh on women, and you literally were outlining all of the parts of the opposite of the negative culture, but the positive pieces, and as I know we're about to be out of time, sort of a last piece of this, we encourage women to be unabashedly visible. When you think about that, can you measure the impact of that? And where does how does that show up?
Yes. I would say my experience is this is the hardest part of our credo, and I have also heard other women at How Women Lead express this. The likability trap, there's actually a great book about that I read a few years ago, is real. And so we have to it's a battle of our own mind. It's getting that support around us. But I would say influence and impact, really, leadership isn't just about personal success, it's about elevating others and shaping the culture. We have opportunities for abundance. I see a lot of scarcity mentality these days, and it's not good for leaders to say that seat at the table, like RBG face when she went to get into law school, that belonged to a man. Why are you taking a man's seat? I see those same narratives here in January 2025, right? That we're saying that men deserve this and women are taking it from them, but there's enough room at the table for everybody. Opportunities expand. We have visibility that opens doors to collaboration, partnerships, and career growth. I have been very blessed to have a boss at work who helped me work on visibility. And I think that women often need that because they need to be given permission to be visible. And you've given us that as well. And I'm so grateful. I think authenticity matters as much as it ever has. We all long to see authentic leaders, and true leadership, the success is really measured by how aligned are you with your own values and mission. I mean, is there an incongruence there for you? I keep these values here, these little cards on my desk because I went through a values exercise years ago and I just keep them there. I want to make decisions based on my own values. And I think that most of us want to do that too, but it takes intentionality. And I would say legacy, building, when you think of the impact of leadership, it extends beyond your personal gain. It's about leaving your workplace better than you found it. What are you leaving behind, and looking toward the future and working toward that. And then lastly, I would just say, with energy and fulfillment, leadership should be energizing, not
Yeah.
draining. And if you're
Right.
leading authentically, then you're probably going to feel the difference. Although I did post, this week about 3 B's of burnout prevention because I think we're needing to get ready for what's coming, polycrises or whatever's happening in our nation and in our world. But at the same time, we do that together, supporting each other. That's leadership. You're willing to be led by others and you're leading others, and we collectively get through this together.
This has been such a beautiful conversation. I know everybody listening, you gotta rewind, and there's so many mic drop moments, Lori. I just wanna say thank you for your extremely unique perspective. Your global experience makes you and your constant learning and all the reference in the books and the mentors and the other people that you've referenced in this conversation. This is the kind of leader we need to see in our country, and so I can't thank you enough for sharing with us today. You are extraordinary. Thank you very much. How can people find you?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. And I just want to say I've been so blessed to be a part of How Women Lead. I had this little candle that you gave us and the winter fundraiser lit in front of me because it's a reminder to look for the light in the darkness and the warmth in the cold. And as we go into this year, I think we're going to need more of that. My spiritual director actually told me this a couple months ago, look for the light and go toward the light. And you have brought so much light into my life. And I'm really honored to be in How Women Lead. So, yes, but you can find me at laurieadamsbrown.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Laurie Adams Brown, and at my podcast, A World of Difference.
Thank you so much, Lori.